David Mercer had always been a patient man. His colleagues at the engineering firm called it composure. His wife called it coldness. He had come to accept that both were true. On the Thursday evening, Maria announced he would need to vacate the house for the weekend. David was sitting at the kitchen table running through a structural load report. She did not sit. She stood in the doorway in a new blouse he did not recognize, and she delivered the news with the practiced casualness of someone who had rehearsed it twice. "I need the house Saturday night," she said. "There's a promotion dinner, drinks after. Some of the team will come back here. It'll go late, and I don't want you hovering." He looked up from the report. He studied her face for exactly 2 seconds. "I'll book a motel," he said. She blinked. She had expected friction. "That's it?" "That's it." She left the room looking vaguely dissatisfied, which was, David noted, the natural state of a woman denied the argument she had been sharpening all afternoon. "Maria, make sure you're out by 6 p.m. Saturday. Don't make this weird." David, "No problem. I'll grab some things Friday night. You won't see me." Maria, "Good. And don't text me during. I'll be busy." David, "Understood. Have a good party." What Maria did not know, what she had completely, fatally forgotten, was the camera. 3 years earlier, the neighbor 2 doors down had thrown a string of late-night gatherings that escalated from annoying to genuinely criminal. Someone's catalytic converter had gone missing. A garden shed had been broken into. David, being David, had not called the police. He had instead spent a Saturday afternoon mounting a small, weatherproof wide-angle security camera high in the fork of the old oak in their backyard, angled to cover the rear yard, the side gate, and a clean diagonal line to the pool deck. The unit ran on a long-life battery pack, backed up its footage to a private cloud server, and streamed live to an app on his phone. The neighbor problem resolved itself when the man was cited for a separate violation and sold the house. The camera had remained. Seasons had passed. Leaves had grown around it, then fallen, then grown again. Maria had walked beneath that oak perhaps 1,000 times. She had not looked up once. David checked the app on Friday night from the parking lot of a mid-range motel off the highway, 12 miles from the house. The feed was crisp. Motion-activated floodlights caught the pool deck in cold, white detail. He set an alert for movement after 9 p.m. and went inside to order room service he did not particularly want. Saturday came and went in the slow, institutional way of motel days. He read. He reviewed contracts. He went for a run along the service road behind the property. At 7:42 p.m., his phone buzzed with a motion alert. He opened the app. The party was well underway. A loose cluster of people stood near the pool with drinks. String lights had been strung from the patio to the fence. Someone had brought a portable speaker. It looked, by any objective measure, like a pleasant evening. David watched with the detached attention of a man reviewing security footage, which was precisely what he was doing. At 9:17 p.m., the cluster had thinned. Most of the guests had moved inside. 2 figures remained by the pool, Maria, and a man David recognized immediately from the company website photo he had looked at, not out of jealousy, but out of professional habit, when she had first mentioned his name 18 months ago. John Calloway, Senior Vice President of Regional Operations, Maria's direct supervisor, the man who had just, according to Maria, championed her promotion. They stood close. Then John said something and Maria laughed, tilting toward him, and David watched the geometry of it shift in the way that geometries shift when proximity becomes intention. The kiss lasted approximately 4 seconds. David noted the timestamp, 9:19 p.m. He took a screenshot. He did not feel rage. He felt something colder and more useful, the clean, unlocking sensation of a man who has just received the last piece of information he needed. David, nice party. The string lights are a good touch. Maria, what? How do you even know what's happening here? David, I know a lot of things, Maria. Check your messages. I sent you something. He opened the smart home app. The house's electrical panel had been integrated into the system 2 summers ago. a feature David had installed during a weekend project Maria had ignored, with the vague contempt she reserved for anything technical and domestic simultaneously. The interface was simple: a toggle, main breaker, Wi-Fi router. David looked at the live feed one more time. The pool lights, the string lights, the warm glow from the kitchen windows, the full, humming infrastructure of a party built on a lie. He pressed the toggle. On the feed, every light in and around the house went dark in the same instant. The music stopped. The pool lights died. For a moment there was nothing on the screen but black and the pale ghost image of the backyard, retained by the camera's low-light sensor. Then, from inside, the sound of voices, confused, then annoyed, then alarmed. David set the phone face down on the motel bedspread. He picked up the remote and found a documentary about deep-sea geological formations. He watched it with his full attention. He had all the time in the world. The next move was hers. Maria's reply to the screenshot came 11 minutes after David sent it. It was not a reply. It was a single word, typed in lowercase, which was how he knew she was not calm. Delete. He did not delete it. What happened next in the dark house on Carmichael Drive, David would only learn in fragments over the following weeks, from a neighbor's account, from a police report he eventually obtained through his attorney, and from the cold arithmetic of the physical evidence. Maria had, by all indications, made a series of very fast decisions in very bad light. First, she had gotten the guests out. John had lingered. She had sent him away too. Then, alone in the unlit house, Maria Mercer had done something David had not anticipated, which was the first and most costly error in his calculations. She had created a crime scene. A vase shattered against the kitchen tile, a framed photograph knocked from the hallway wall, and the detail that would appear in the police report as self-inflicted superficial lacerations consistent with fingernails. She had raked her own forearms hard enough to mark the skin. Then, she had called 911. Maria, you think this is a game? You just made the worst mistake of your life. David, I sent you a screenshot. That's all I did. Good night, Maria. Maria, don't contact me again. I mean it. He had been asleep for less than 2 hours when the knock came. 3 officers, polite, efficient, and possessing a warrant. David sat up and put his feet on the carpet and answered their questions in a measured voice that he understood, even then. Probably read as suspicious to men trained to expect either panic or aggression. The allegation, as described to him in the motel parking lot with his hands zip-tied behind him, was as follows. Maria Mercer had reported that her estranged husband had, in an act of deliberate psychological terror, remotely disabled the power to her home while she was hosting guests, had sent her a threatening message indicating he was surveilling her, and had a prior history of controlling behavior. She had injuries consistent with a physical altercation. David thought about explaining the camera. He thought about the smart home app. He thought about the screenshot time-stamped 9:19 p.m. He said nothing. His phone, containing the screenshot, the app, and the live feed archive, was placed into an evidence bag. The restraining order was processed by 6 a.m. The felony charge, domestic harassment with electronic means, a prosecutor's creative interpretation of a statute designed for cyberstalkers, landed on his record before noon. He was processed, released on bond, and deposited on a courthouse sidewalk in yesterday's clothes, with a list of conditions that included, prominently, that he was not to return to 4417 Carmichael Drive. His house, his camera, his tree. David, attorney Sandra Cho. I need to meet. Today, if possible. I've been arrested. Sandra Cho. I saw the charge. Come in at 2. Don't speak to anyone about this. Not a word. David. Understood. They have my phone. It has everything. Sandra Cho. Everything cuts both ways, David. Let's talk first. Sandra Cho had been a family law attorney for 19 years. She had the specific tiredness of someone who had stopped being surprised by human behavior without having stopped caring about it. She listened to David's account across a conference table, stacked with other people's disasters, and did not interrupt. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. The camera footage, she said. It's cloud-backed? Private server, password protected. They'd need a separate warrant for the service provider. Have they pursued that? Not yet. Then it still exists. She wrote something down. We are going to need it. I know. David, she looked up. I want to be direct with you. Right now, on paper, this looks like a controlling husband who cut the power to terrorize his wife at a party, then sent her a threatening message and got caught. That is the story. Our job is to build the other story, the true one. He nodded. It will take time, she said. I have time, he said, which was the only lie he told her that day. The rental was a one-bedroom unit above a laundromat on Prescott Street. The building smelled permanently of warm fabric and industrial detergent. David moved in with a duffel bag and a laptop, and a carefully maintained sense of forward motion that he permitted himself to examine only at night, when the ceiling offered nothing useful. 6 weeks passed. Sandra filed motions. The prosecution, buoyed by the restraining order and Maria's visible injuries, was not in a hurry. The phone remained in evidence. The cloud server footage remained accessible only in theory. Sandra had sent a preservation request to the hosting company. It had been acknowledged. That was the word she used. Acknowledged. David went to work. He ate. He ran the same service road loop he had found near the motel, now transferred to a park trail 3 blocks from Prescott Street. He did not drink. He did not, despite the daily temptation, attempt to access the security camera feed from a secondary device, which would have constituted a violation of both the restraining order and his attorney's explicit instructions. He watched his house from the internet instead. Maria had updated her social media for the first time in years. The photos were strategic, the kitchen island freshly staged, a Sunday brunch on the back patio, the string lights still up. In one photo, the edge of a man's forearm was visible at the frame's border, artfully cropped. John Calloway had not posted anything. John Calloway, David had learned from public records, drove a late-model German sports car and owned, through an LLC, a condo downtown he had apparently not been using. Sandra Cho. Prosecution offered a plea. Misdemeanor harassment. No jail, community service, fine. David. No. Sandra Cho. I expected that. Just documenting it. We turn it down and we go to trial. David. We go to trial. The divorce filing arrived via certified mail on a Tuesday. Maria was seeking the house, primary asset in the marriage. Alimony, 18 months minimum, citing career disruption. Legal fees. The kitchen renovation they had done 3 years prior had increased the property value by an amount her attorney had helpfully calculated to the nearest $100. David read through it with the same attention he gave to structural specifications, noting the load-bearing elements and the components that were decorative. Then he filed it and called Sandra. She's overreaching, Sandra said. She's scared, David said. Scared people grab. Can you hold financially? He had been quietly moving liquid assets for 3 months before the arrest, not out of prescience about the specifics, but out of a general practice of never concentrating risk. For now, he said. The injustice of the thing was not something he permitted himself to articulate often. It was present, the way a low-frequency sound is present, not consciously heard, but felt in the sternum. He had gone to a motel as asked. He had watched his wife commit adultery on his own property, using his own streaming infrastructure. He had sent her a photograph of the fact, and he was now the defendant. At night, on the ceiling above the Prescott Street bed, he replayed the scenario, looking for the error in his own logic. The only one he found was this. He had underestimated what she was willing to do. He would not make that mistake again. Unknown number. This is John. Back off the legal games before this gets worse for you. David. I don't know who you are. Please don't contact me again. David to Sandra Cho. Forwarding you a message. Add it to the file. Sandra added it to the file. David went back to waiting. He had always been a patient man. Patience, he was learning, was only a virtue when something was coming. The trick was knowing it would. Old man Henderson had lived across the street from 4417 Carmichael Drive for 22 years. He was 71, retired from the Water Authority, and possessed of the specific territorial pride of a man who had hand-laid the brick retaining wall along his front property line one summer in the late 90s, and could tell you the weight of every stone. He did not much care for the new arrangement at the Mercer house. He had said as much to his daughter on the phone. He did not elaborate, because he was not a man who elaborated, but he watched. Men of Henderson's generation and temperament always watched. The sports car he had noticed weeks ago, silver, German, parked in the Mercer driveway 3 or 4 nights a week with the confidence of a vehicle that had never been scratched, and expected to remain that way. Henderson had noted the license plate the way he noted everything, not for any particular purpose, but because he was the kind of man who noted things. On a Saturday night in the 7th week of David Mercer's exile, Henderson was sitting on his front porch at 11:40 p.m. He did this when he could not sleep, which was increasingly often. The neighborhood was quiet. The Mercer string lights were on. The front door of the Mercer house opened, and John Calloway came out with the gait of a man who had consumed enough alcohol to disable his judgment without yet disabling his confidence. He had his keys. He had his jacket. He had, Henderson could see from across the street, a completely serene expression of a man who believed the normal rules were suspended on Saturday nights. Henderson watched him get in the car. "Don't," Henderson said, to no one. The silver car backed out of the driveway too fast, corrected, and pulled forward toward the street. Henderson stood up. What happened next took approximately 2 seconds. The car crossed the street at an angle that suggested the driver had seen Henderson's brick wall very recently and had been unable to translate that visual information into a useful steering adjustment. The collision was not catastrophic by automotive standards. By the standards of a retaining wall that had stood for 26 years, it was personal. The sound brought Maria out of the house at a run. Maria to John. "What happened? I heard a crash. Are you outside?" John. "Hit something. I'm fine. Don't come out." Maria. "Oh my God. John, I see the lights. Stay there." The first police cruiser arrived in 4 minutes. The officers had body cams, which was standard. They noted the deployed airbag, the damaged wall, and the driver, who was cooperative in the unfocused way of a man who understood that cooperation was currently his best available strategy. Maria arrived in the street in a light jacket over pajamas. She had the look of someone who had not anticipated any of this, which was accurate. Henderson stood on his porch with his arms crossed and watched. For approximately 90 seconds, Maria maintained the controlled demeanor of a woman managing a complicated situation. She spoke with the officers. She touched John's arm. She looked at the wall and produced the right expression. Then John said something to her, quietly, and something in his tone. Henderson could not hear the words, only the register, cracked whatever she had been holding together. "Are you serious?" Her voice was no longer quiet. "Do you understand what I did for this? What I actually did?" John said something else, placating. Wrong choice. "I lied to the cops," she said. The body cams were rolling. The officers had paused. Henderson had not moved. "I put my husband in jail, John. I gave us that house. I risked everything, my testimony, my record, everything, to get us that house, and you can't even drive 3 blocks without—" One of the officers stepped forward. Maria stopped. She looked at the officer. She looked at the small camera mounted on his chest. The understanding arrived on her face, the way understanding arrives when it is already too late, fully formed and utterly useless. Henderson to David Mercer. "This is your neighbor Harold Henderson from across the street. Don't know if you have this number. Something happened tonight you should know about. Call me when you can." David. "Mr. Henderson, I have your number. I'll call you in the morning. Are you all right?" Henderson. "I'm fine. My wall isn't. Call me." David called Henderson at 7:14 a.m. He listened without interrupting for 11 minutes. Henderson was not a man given to embellishment, which made his account more useful, not less. He described what he had seen: the car, the wall, the officers, the body cams. He described what he had heard. He described Maria's exact words to the best of his recollection, which was, it turned out, very good. "She said she lied to the police," Henderson said. "She said she put her husband in jail. That's what she said. I heard it clear." "Mr. Henderson," David said, "would you be willing to speak with my attorney?" A pause. "I laid those bricks myself," Henderson said, by way of answering. Sandra Cho filed the subpoena for the body cam footage within the same business day. The department, faced with a straightforward request and a clearly documented incident report, complied within 72 hours. Sandra watched the footage twice before she called David. He could hear something in her voice that he had not heard in 2 months of calls. Momentum. "It's clean," she said. "The audio is clean. Both cameras caught it. Different angles. Same words." "How does this change our position?" "It doesn't change our position," Sandra said. "It ends the case." Sandra Cho. "Criminal charges dropped. DA's office confirmed this morning. They're not pursuing it." David. "Understood. What about family court?" Sandra Cho. "We have a hearing Thursday. Be there at 9. Bring nothing. I'll bring everything." The family courtroom was a room designed to make everyone feel slightly diminished, which David had always thought was probably intentional. He sat at the respondent's table in a dark suit and said nothing while Sandra arranged her materials with the quiet efficiency of a surgeon prepping instruments. Maria sat across the aisle with her attorney. She had dressed carefully. She did not look at David. The judge, the Honorable Patricia Wren, had been on the bench for 16 years and had developed the particular economy of expression that comes from having heard everything. She called the session to order. Maria's attorney presented first. The house, the alimony claim, the disruption to Maria's professional standing, the trauma of the incident. It was a competent performance. The attorney had a good voice for sympathy. Sandra stood when it was her turn. She did not make a speech. She said, "Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A, which is police body cam footage from an incident at 4417 Carmichael Drive on the evening of March 8th, and request the court's permission to play it." Permission was granted. The room watched the footage. It was 53 seconds of relevant audio, embedded in 4 minutes of incident documentation. The relevant portion played once. Judge Wren's expression did not change. She asked for it to be played again. It was played again. Maria's attorney leaned toward his client and whispered something. Maria was not listening to him. Maria was watching the screen with the fixed, evacuated expression of someone who had just seen their entire architecture collapse in 53 seconds. Judge Wren set down her pen. "Ms. Mercer," she said, "I'm going to ask the bailiff to approach you. Do not be alarmed, and do not say anything further. You have the right to an attorney, which I see you already have." Maria's attorney was on his feet. "Your Honor." "Sit down, counselor." The judge turned to the clerk. "I want the DA's office on the phone in the next 20 minutes. We're looking at perjury and filing a false police report. This court will also be reporting Mr. Calloway's involvement to his licensing board." The bailiff crossed the room. Maria did not resist. She stood when asked, and she let her wrists be taken, and she walked out of the courtroom in the good clothes she had worn to win. "Unknown. David. It's me." "They let me make one call. I need you to—" "Unknown. Please. I'm not okay. I need someone. I need—" "Unknown. Are you there?" He let the phone ring 3 times before he answered. He was sitting in the parking garage beneath the courthouse, jacket off, window down, watching a pigeon negotiate a concrete ledge with considerable seriousness of purpose. Her voice was thin and very far away. "David, I know you probably hate me. I understand that, but I'm not well. I'm scared and I need you to—" He listened until she stopped. Then he said with the same level, considered tone he had used for every conversation in the last 2 months, "You wanted a party without me." A pause. "Enjoy the new guests." He ended the call. He put the phone in his jacket pocket. He sat for another minute watching the pigeon, which had by this point resolved its deliberations and flown off somewhere with greater ambitions. Then, David Mercer started the car and drove home.
That ending still gives me chills. David's story is the ultimate proof of that old saying: if you give an arrogant person enough rope, they'll eventually tie their own noose. What fascinates me most isn't even the hidden camera. It's David's absolute terrifying patience. Most of us would have kicked the front door down the second we saw that kiss by the pool, but he played the long game, took some brutal legal hits, and let Maria's own overconfidence be her ultimate downfall. Personally, I think his restraint is what makes this a masterpiece of karma. He didn't have to destroy her. She did all the heavy lifting herself. But I want to hear your take on this. Was David's cold, calculated silence the brilliant move of a survivor, or was he almost too ruthless at the end? How would you have reacted in that motel room? Let's debate it in the comments below.